So I don't know if you've heard, our story of having silos at headquarters or not. And I don't know if you all experience silos where perhaps your religious education committee may not talk so much with the worship committee, even though that there's an incredible opportunity there. Well, there was a little bit of that going on. So we thought, what would happen if we turned the organization into a learning community, a learning entity? And so we figured out something that they could all learn together. And we took on John Roberto's trainings, hook, line, and sinker, Faith Formation 2020, also known as Faith Formation for the 21st Century. And I started brokering, like a Yenta, started brokering people from different staff groups to go to those trainings together in a different city and learn something together, and then they'd cross-fertilize. And I'm watching now, I did collect stats for a while, that continued learning keeps going. And then so somebody in the IT department, information technology department, might have gone to a training with the faith development department, and then somebody from stewardship. Well, lo and behold, they're finding ways and reasons to work together. So think of that as your learning. If you want change to happen, become a learning community. Find something to go. Honestly, I don't think it even really matters what you go learn. You could find something really good, but go get out to other congregations and learn. Okay. So what we did is Stefan and I went to headquarters and wanted to collect some data just to get a baseline of where we were. And we asked 3 big questions. The first question was just, how does what you do help growth? Now, Chris Walton has given me permission to share this with you. We went to Chris Walton, who is the editor of the UU World, which is like the one thing that every Unitarian Universalist gets. And I asked Chris Walton, I said, so what is what you do, how does that help growth? How does that aid growth? And he looked at me blankly and he said, Tandy, I'm a journalist. I'm like, okay. And how does that help with growth? I have a ton of ideas how the UU World helps growth. And he's like, it's a journal. It doesn't really. I'm like, oh my God, you're breaking my heart. I mean, I wanted to cry. I'm like, Chris, dude, your platform is the one thing that we all share. It has to do with faith formation, faith identity. And then the big boom idea happened of what if we took the breakthrough congregation model rather than having it just at GA where only you all really saw it. What if we put that in the UU World so everybody could see it? And do you remember that moment? He lit up and then he got tears in his eyes. He goes, okay, I'm on board. What do we need to do? And I don't know if you've noticed in the UU World, but in the last 3 years, there's a lot more graphs, articles about growth, all this. So I want to plant that seed that sometimes that growth catalyst in your congregations may not understand just how important they are. So find those partners to help them see and get sparky. The next question we asked was it this one? Yeah, it was, because there was 3 questions. Okay, I'll give you the very last question, and then we're going to jump on this. The last question we asked was, if you were a Unitarian Universalist religious entrepreneur, how would you invest? Oh, thank you. Isn't that a sparky question? So think about that. You're a UU entrepreneur. How would you invest in your zip code? And notice I don't say just in your congregation, because our faith is so much bigger than a brick and mortar building. Okay? That was also really juicy for people, and it shifted. We started shifting it and getting more permission giving with maybe glow-in-the-dark tattoos is a great investment. Right? I mean, that kind of gave me permission. I'm like, if I were an entrepreneur, I would get glow-in-the-dark tattoos. And then when I bought them, somebody from finance called and said, what are you spending money on? What does this have to do with growth? And I gave her a tattoo, and I said, go put the glow-in-the-dark tattoo on, wear it around in public, come back and tell me what happens. And it wasn't just the invitation out to people. It was, oh my gosh, I have to practice. What does Unitarian Universalism mean? I've got to explain this to people. And that's where the magic was. Okay. The big question that I want to share with you that's on the slide is, what 3 things, if your congregation stopped doing, would contribute to growth? You know, when we asked that to staff, overwhelmingly, they said, the staff meetings drive us nuts. Right? We've got work to do. And to stop and there were a lot of staff meetings and committee meetings. And I let the leadership council know, and bless them, on a dime, they said, all right, we're doing it different. And then the rest of the staff got to see that and hear it, that what they said matters, and that we shifted. So be careful when you ask that question. You have to be ready to then let go and go somewhere else. That letting go of control, or letting go of how it's going to end up. When we surrender, I feel it over and over again, that when we surrender and trust each other, that just goodness happens. Okay, so think about that. What 3 things, if you stopped doing in your congregation, would actually lead to growth? And I'm hereby giving you permission to stop doing them and feel it. And you're going to disappoint people too. I just want to warn you when you do this. Don't come back to me and go, oh, Tandy, you led me down a really bad path. People were ticked off. People will be ticked off. And they're going to miss some of whatever it was that you said. Now, here's a strategy. If it's something really big, then you might want to make a list of who's going to be disappointed and then strategically disappoint them. Let them know ahead of time. I know this is important to you. We're going to do it differently. And if it was really, really important, we might come back and keep doing it, or we might not. But I just want you to know, I see it, I know it. Okay. Oh, do I do the 3 things? All right. So when Stefan and I did this for kind of our global overall, bless him, I was a former teacher, so I'm just full of these little exercises, and he just plays right along with me. Thank you, Stefan. So when we did this, we looked globally at what are the 3 things that we need to leave behind to stop doing or saying or attaching to. The certitude that we have the one right way of expressing Unitarian Universalism, or the one right way to organize ourselves, or that we know what the landscape is, and boy, we have the answer. If we just invite the nuns, they're going to come. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. So the necessary fixes are not always technical. An adaptive fix, that taking a culture, here's the culture, here's where you want it to be, how do we get there? It's not going to be a checklist. It's not going to be 100 things you can do and then it's magically going to happen. It's often, what do we need to learn? Who do we need to partner with? What do we need to let go of? We also often need to leave behind the story. That horrible story, I don't even want to say it, but certain regions don't grow, things like that. We need to let that go. Let it go. And I love the Byron Katie work of when you have a story and you're wrestling with it, asking, is it really true? Let me try on. Who would I be if it weren't true? Isn't that a lovely question? Who would I be if I just let that story go? And then what is the story I'm really called to live into? Because if we're to embrace a different story, if we're to embrace our aspirations, we need to let go of the barriers, the old stories that keep us stuck. We also need to let go of the notion that we create our mission, because our mission is usually the thing that owns us. It's not comfortable. It's messy. It will require that we experiment, and it will bring us into wholeness.